I'm building a modular LEGO mini golf course with multiple different levels, so I can finally play golf at home. Though I have a feeling that making such a thing with LEGO might be a little more complex than I initially expected. Because to make this work, we will have to build the following 4 things, being a modular playing surface, a putter, a mini golf ball, and lastly, lots of different obstacles. Starting with the track itself. Because if we don't get this right, then the entire project would just not be possible. I'll be using these large green base plates, and I'm placing them upside down onto these other base plates, so that we get this smooth surface instead of the studs. Though there still are these tiny indents, which I disliked at first. But little did I know they would actually prove extremely useful further on into the project. Since I clearly don't have the room to have multiple courses next to each other, I had this idea of creating a modular system, which will work by linking base plates as chunks of 4 with these pins, similar to how LEGO does that with its modular buildings. And the reason why I'm elevating the green base plate slightly is because the golf balls obviously need to be able to drop down into the hole, which I'm building here with this sideways building technique. And I managed to form a rather decent looking circular shape for LEGO standards, if I do say so myself. And I'm building the cup in between 2 base plates, so that I only have to fill this single gap with other pieces. I initially thought to use upside down plates, but that created a surface which I thought to be too uneven. So instead I came up with this idea to stack those same plates sideways. And I'm using plates instead of the regular bricks, since I don't have any bricks in this color, as I initially bought these for my LEGO pool table, which I built a while back. Yeah, I had to destroy that to build this project. So there's no backing out of this now. And I had to go to extreme measures to compress these plates, which was a dreadful task. Though if I ever need to separate them, it will be an even bigger nightmare. But that's none of our business right now. I then finished the widened track around the cup by adding some more green plates to round off the corners, and finally added these large square plates, which will act as the track's borders and will prevent the balls from falling off. Once I had eventually figured out the design, I set out to build all of the other modular segments of this LEGO mini golf course, with mostly straights and 2 corner blocks. Now, the big challenge with this project is making it foolproof, since I want to make this feel as close to a real mini golf course as possible. And I specifically don't want to have to fear that things might break, like the cue stick of my LEGO pool table did. So it's going to be very interesting to see whether I can level up my building methods this time. This track is honestly turning out to be so much bigger than I had expected. So it seems like I'll have to get creative with making enough obstacles. But right now, the only thing left to build to finish this track was the starting point, officially called the T area. And it seems like it can be made in various shapes. But I ultimately chose this rectangular form, since I reckoned it would be the easiest to build with LEGO. Except from having to use the terrible plate stacking technique again, this all went quite smoothly. However, I had a strong suspicion that making the 2 primary pieces of equipment, being the LEGO golf ball and putter, would both be very difficult tasks. But the only way to find out is to actually build them, and I decided to start with the putter. This is where it's going to get challenging, because these rounded shapes seemed quite difficult to translate into LEGO. But I tried my best using lots of curved slopes and rounded tiles, and it is honestly looking pretty decent. However, looks are not my top priority. That would be rigidity. And well, building a thin but strong rod out of LEGO very quickly unveiled our first issues. I had already suspected that these thin cylinder pieces would not stay connected regularly. But I had hoped that linking them together with a bunch of axles in the middle would fix that issue. But it didn't. Because there is no axle long enough to fill the entire shaft. And stacking them doesn't work, as it turns out, since that creates these weak points where two axles are joined together. But then I remembered a handy technique that I discovered in my last video, where you stack lots of these thin plates together to form a very strong structure. It does require significantly more pieces, but I believe this is the strongest way to build such a thin shaft. It actually seems to be holding together pretty good, but we won't know for sure until we have a Lego mini golf ball. So let's try to build one of those. A year back I designed Lego pool balls for my Lego pool table, but they didn't end up being particularly round. And they do not roll in any predictable way whatsoever. A mini golf ball has a diameter of approximately 4 centimeters, which translates to about 5 Lego studs. And luckily for me, this relatively new cylinder hemisphere has a diameter of exactly 5 studs. So that's exactly what I have ordered. These seemed perfect, but they were a little light. Therefore I added some bricks on the inside to add a bit of extra weight to get it closer to the 48 grams of a real mini golf ball. And with that, it was time for the first little test run. And it actually worked brilliantly. However, the course as of now is, well, rather boring. So I think it is about time to start building some obstacles. And I've actually got a lot of ideas in mind. Starting off simple, I built these triangle blocks, which we can place on each side. But here I encountered a problem, because if you hit a triangle hard enough, it would move, which is not ideal. But then I realized that these plates have these little indents. However, they are too small to fit regular Lego studs. But surely something would have to fit in there, right? And sure enough, after searching through my bins, I found these thin bar pieces, which fitted perfectly. And with that wonderful discovery, I tweaked the design slightly to fit a few antenna pieces in each triangle. And there we go. They will now simply lock in place. At least that's what I had hoped. But as you can likely tell, this didn't exactly go to plan. And all of that was because I simply hadn't provided enough structural support for the top layer in these areas right here. So I was back to square one, tearing open every chunk of track and reinforcing the base plates as much as I could with the door frames I had left. However, halfway through the operation I had already ran through nearly all of them. And I did not want to use regular bricks, because I needed to preserve those for some big obstacles I was planning to build later on. But then I discovered that these plates fit perfectly if you flip them and squeeze them between the studs of the base plates. The only catch is that this is an illegal building technique, which means that it puts a little more stress on the pieces than recommended. Hence why you will never see Lego use this technique in any official sets. But for my situation, this looked like a brilliant solution for my part shortages. Hopefully I don't regret it. And after placing these difficult to attach wall plates back in place, it looks like we have finally finished our first obstacle. It took some tinkering to get right, but this bar piece locking technique really was a great discovery, and is exactly why I love building custom stuff with Lego. It all starts with the initial idea, like how I thought to make a Lego mini golf course. From there you simply start building, and sometimes the end result is so different compared to what you initially envisioned. But that's the fun part of this whole design process. Like how I initially wanted to stretch this hill over the whole width of the track. But since I didn't have enough green pieces, I had to think of a different way to make this slope a bit more exciting. So I then thought of the idea to create two possible routes. The first one goes over the right half and is just a standard slope up and down. But you could also try aiming at this small curved ramp at the top on the left hand side. This will get the ball onto a downward slope, with the intent of getting the ball straight into the hole. This next obstacle is going to be one of the trickiest pieces of the puzzle, since I want to make a Lego looping. I had already figured that building this big round structure with regular bricks would be incredibly time and part consuming. Therefore, I reckoned that using Lego Technic would be my best bet. But it's not going to be easy, because it needs to be built out of enough segments to be round enough. But that does mean it's going to be quite big, which then means it's going to be more difficult to make it robust enough and ensure that it doesn't collapse. And even if we get all of that right, we need to hope that it is even possible to hit the ball hard enough with the putter to complete the full loop. But these guardrails I'm building here will hopefully help with that. I am very curious to see whether this looping actually works, because it looks quite intimidating. But before we can try it out, we've got another 3 obstacles left to build. The discovery of Lego Technic gave me a lot more possibilities, such as motorization, which I used to build a rotating cross that could potentially push your ball back or further forwards, depending on where you aim at. These Lego motors could possibly also help me build a spinning windmill, one of the most iconic mini-golf obstacles. But we will get to that in a minute. This cross was coming together pretty nicely, though it was spinning a little too quickly. Therefore, I added a gear ratio on top of the motor, which slows down its output. And with that, our first motorized obstacle is completed. Now, the way mini-golf works, if you don't know already, is by counting the amount of strokes you need to complete a course. You then write down your scores for each level, and once you've completed all of them, you count up the strokes of all levels to get your final score. For this level, I wanted to make something to influence that score a little more. So I came up with the idea to make the 2 big arches a +1 stroke and the single small middle one a -1 stroke. With this, taking the risk of going for the smaller opening could be beneficial for your score. And I added a few signs on top to visualize this all. And now it's time for the final and biggest obstacle. And really the one I was the most excited about since the start of this project. Being a motorized windmill with spinning blades and a small arch in the middle. Meaning you have to time your shot perfectly to not hit one of the blades. This windmill seems to be a true mini-golf icon. I'm not entirely sure why, but it appears to have been one of the first moving obstacles, alongside numerous other, more colorful and flashy themes such as castles, which gave mini-golf a big popularity spike in the 1950s. This massive project has used a lot of pieces out of my Lego inventory. But I really needed a few more red bricks to finish this windmill. Specifically slopes for the roof is what I was looking for. But then it suddenly dawned on me that I had held lots of these slopes earlier on during this project. And opening the side walls revealed precisely what I was looking for. After fetching the red slopes and replacing them with other pieces, I quickly finished the roof, after which I constructed the blades using a combination of Technic and regular Lego pieces. And then there was only one thing left to do, which is reinforcing these border plates. Because since I started this project, I've noticed the walls were one of the weakest areas. And I need to fix this quickly, as a few friends will come over tonight for a Lego mini-golf tournament to test whether everything actually works. I really hope it will. And with that, the Lego mini-golf course is completely finished. I think it is about time to go through every level and see if the obstacles are actually as fun as I had imagined. And my friends have just arrived, so let the tournament begin. Starting with level 1. I initially thought to place all the triangles against the walls, but placing 2 of them in the middle of the track created an even more intriguing experience. Both my friends surprisingly got the hang of it right away. My start wasn't quite so perfect. At level 2 you had to be lined up quite precisely to reach the side slope, which none of us managed to do unfortunately. But I guess that does prove it is challenging enough to justify the shortcut it offers. Level 3 was quite a fast one, if you managed to hit the cross at the right spot, like both of my friends did. Though if you aimed poorly, the cross would return your ball back to the start, with a lot more strokes as a result. And take a guess who managed to do that several times. Yep, that would be me again. Next up was the relatively simple level 4. But the -1 stroke reward really did encourage you to go for that smaller arch, which was quite misleading if you were not lined up properly. At level 5 it was really fun to try and get the timing of your shot just right on this beautiful classic minigolf level. Level 6 took noticeably more tries than the other levels, but all of us did eventually manage to complete this final level. Playing this custom Lego version of minigolf was so much fun, and it honestly worked way better than I ever could have expected. Especially since I had feared that things would break continuously, or obstacles would be unbeatable. But the only thing that broke a few times were the track walls, but they could be quickly fixed when moving to a new level. And honestly, mending the track together and then designing the next levels with my friends was just as fun as playing the actual game. Though I did lose the competition to both of them. But besides that, I couldn't be happier with how this has turned out. However, if this is not your type of entertainment, no worries. You can instead do some gaming or Netflix and chill on the Lego computer monitor I built out of a broken laptop in the previous video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.